Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please tell your kids' teachers, principals, and librarians. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Nic Yulo. She's returning to the show to celebrate Out of the Blue. Before we invite Nic back into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods, written by Stacy Woodson. Stacy is a registered dietitian. She is also the mom of a very picky eater. She was inspired to write The Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods by the beautiful members of her family. In this delightful book, we will meet a child who will only eat foods that starts with the letter B. Anytime she is offered a new food, her favorite phrase is, "No thank you, not today, no way." So if you like to eat, this is the book for you. If you like to try new foods, this is the book for you. And if you don't like to try new foods, this book is especially for you. However, you're going to have to read the book to figure out what makes the silly princess try new foods. Stacy has also written The Prince of Picky Eating Tries New Foods for those of you who have a picky male in your family. Check it out today. You're going to love this book, The Princess and the Prince of Picky Eating Tries New Foods. Join us right now from New York City. Our guest is returning to celebrate her brand new picture book. Please welcome back to the show author, illustrator, fantastic person, Nic Yulo. Hey, Nic, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me back.
I'm delighted to have you back. We had so much fun learning about patches and learning how to draw patches, and it was such a delight, and everybody loved that so much. I know they're going to love learning all about the new book, Out of the Blue.
Yeah, I am so excited for this next book to come out.
So tell us all about Out of the Blue.
Yeah, so Out of the Blue brings to you another little girl and animal pairing, this time of the marine variety. So instead of PN patches, we now have Coral and Kraken, again with the consonants. And Coral, our main character, is on a field trip, a very special field trip to an aquarium with the rest of her schoolmates. And she is the smallest, tiniest, most quiet person in the class. And she's used to being left behind and overlooked. And she finds another tiny, tiny creature that is also used to being overlooked.
Ooh, so neat. Well, being a fairly tiny isn't the word. Short, I would say vertically challenged person. It's been a long time since I've been tiny. But I can kind of relate to Coral. You know, people overlook me sometimes.
Yeah, I think everyone at one point in their life is used to feeling invisible. And I wanted to write a story about how that feels, especially to a kid, and what it takes to build your confidence enough to let you shine at the end.
Yeah. That's an expression we hear a lot of these days, that the whole idea of being seen.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean for you?
I feel like it can mean a lot of things. With this particular book, I like the idea of tying in to the science of marine life. So this particular octopus has a survival mechanism that makes him bioluminescent. So he is used to feeling invisible and then turns on the bioluminescence when he needs to. So in that way, I think our main character, Coral, finds that there is a use to being invisible and choosing when to come out of your shell. Yeah, I think this is my book for introverted kids. I was very much an introverted kid.
Mm-hmm. 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 Do you think that being introverted was something that kind of spurred you on to become the amazing illustrator you are right now? It's because it's like, well, this is a way I can express myself.
Yes, you are very kind. Thank you. But yes, I think that was the main reason I started writing as a kid, because it was very difficult for me to be in a group of people, to have conversations. So I would always have a notebook that I would write things down and like try to sketch everything I could. That was my way of communicating.
I thought you were going to say I was always had a notebook and I would write down what I would say. Like I do that. I get into a conversation, then you know, like an hour later, I go, "Oh, I should have said this," but then it's the context is gone.
That's very smart. I like listening to other people and writing down what they say. Yeah. Very good ideas happen.
Yeah. So what is it about the octopus that inspired you to include it in the story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge nerd, as we all know at this point. And octopuses are extremely intelligent creatures. And there's so much variety in what they can do, the subspecies of octopuses. This one in particular is, well, the one that he's based on is known as the adorabilis because it's adorable, but also because it's tiny. And I like the idea of playing with bigness and smallness. You have a very small, tiny main character. You have a very small, tiny animal main character in a very big world trying to find their way.
Yeah. I'm imagining that there's lots of kids can relate to coral, that, you know, they feel small. They're in this big world, especially if they're living in a city like New York City or Boston, where there's so much going on. There's so many people around. I've been to towns where literally everybody knows each other. And so that's a very different feeling. But when you're in a big city, it's all these people around. You're in a school with maybe 500, 1,000 kids. And, I can see where they could relate to coral.
Yeah, I hope that they do. When we first meet Coral in the beginning, the first thing that is said is that she has very big dreams, but she is very small. So she has no idea how to make them become a reality. And it's in meeting Kraken and going through the aquarium and finding out how different everything is in the marine ecosystem of the aquarium that she's like, oh, there is space for everyone. And she learns eventually to speak up.
Yeah. How is it for you? Because I know when we first spoke, you telling us about Patch of Sky, and that was the first book that you wrote and illustrated, and it was your debut writing, debut as an author. And I think you told me that you always considered yourself an illustrator who writes. Is that the same now, or are you starting to think of yourself more as an author who is also a pretty amazing illustrator?
I think it's so different because picture books, I'm working on another project that I am more an author, I would say, on that one. It is for older readers, middle school readers. It is novel format. So it really depends on the project. This one in particular was challenging because Patch of Sky was relatively simple is not the right word, but it was very specific in its color palette, in the use of white space. There was a lot of blank space and graphic sort of design. In this book, everything is illustrated. So there's a lot more colors, a lot more characters, both in the fish and human variety. So it was very tough. It's also longer than Patch of Sky. So yeah, it took a lot of sleepless nights and way more skills to refine.
I have to ask, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but did you get into the book and, you know, now suddenly you have to draw all this ocean and all the things that are in the ocean and say to yourself, why did I do this? I should have just made this a lot simpler.
I feel like that tends to happen with all of the things that I do is I get excited when I don't quite know how I'm going to pull it off exactly. And then there's a crisis that happens at some point in the process. But that's how I know I'm on the right project, is I'm excited to figure this out. Luckily, I hope I did figure it out by the end of it. But I remember the research process for this was far more extensive. I was living practically in the American Museum of Natural History in their like marine wing with the giant whale in the ceiling. just finding out like which character should I include. I wanted there to be realistic facts that binded all of the characters. So that was really fun.
Yeah. You mentioned the whale in the ceiling. I had, for many years, I would celebrate New Year's Eve with the beautiful people in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And for, I think, 5 years, my stage was in the Whaling Museum, and I performed underneath a whale skeleton.
Oh, my God.
And one of the things that always blew my mind was how immense this creature was. And all I was looking at was the bones. And I'm like, oh, you throw skin and blubber and all that other stuff. And it's just, the ocean is like this incredible place that we really don't know all that much about.
Yes, I agree. I think it is a fascinating, slightly terrifying place. I've always been, as a kid, afraid of the ocean, which I find really ironic given this book and the book that I'm working on now. But yeah, I feel like we know very little. There's a lot more that we can discover, I feel.
Yeah. Well, we've had some scientists on the podcast here, and I forget the number, but I think they said we know about 5% of what's going on in the ocean, and the ocean covers most of the earth. So
yeah, I feel like we know, please don't quote me on this, but I feel like we know more about space than we do our own ocean.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah. There's hands down. We know way more about space than we do about the ocean. And that's kind of crazy.
That is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Do you think that a book like this, and Coral, I'm seeing kids that are going to read this book and they're going to relate to Coral and the octopus, and they're going to be inspired to find their place in the world. Do you think any might be inspired to become oceanographers?
I hope so. I hope that they find something in this to spark at least some kind of curiosity, either in like conservation, or in the ocean specifically. In general, I tend to want to infuse some real science facts into the picture books that I do. Because again, nerd. So if I can like sort of spark that curiosity in a reader, that would be the most amazing thing.
Yeah. You keep referring to yourself as a nerd, and that's fine. It's wonderful. But you made me think of the fact, one of the reasons I love doing the Reading with Your Kids podcast is that I get to speak to an illustrator like you, and we learn your process, and you teach us how to do, to draw patches. But then I also get to sit down and speak for a half an hour or so with somebody like Dr. Sylvia Earle, who is the world's most renowned oceanographer, and astronauts. And so being a podcaster, being an author, being a creative like you are, it gives you license, it gives you the excuse to go off and really just kind of explore the way we did when we were kids, when, we didn't have responsibilities. We could just go, today I want to study the ocean. You can just go and spend all the time in the museum. You get to do that as an adult. How cool is that?
It is very cool. I have the coolest job in the world, in my opinion.
Did you always know, I know that you've had a love of writing and love of illustrating, but did you always know that it was going to be your life's work, that this was going to how was the way you're going to make your living?
Not at all. So, I had always been writing and drawing, but never quite took it seriously until I want to say the last year of college. I was very much on the academic, computer science, logical track. And it took a painting professor to be like, nope, why don't you do art? And that changed everything. So yes, this has been quite a plot twist, but I wouldn't change it for anything.
If it doesn't work out as an illustrator, you can always go back to that professor and go, yo, dude, I was on the way. I was all set. You mentioned that you're writing, you had another project going on for older kids, and we want to touch on that. But I referred to you earlier on as a creative, and you very much are a creative. You're we learned the last time you're on the podcast that you're into filmmaking and game writing and all that kind of stuff. Have you found a favorite way to create yet?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I don't think so. I think hopefully this never changes, but I think I'm still at the stage where everything I get to do is exciting in a different way, and I'm just happy to be here. So let's see if that changes 5 years down the line. But so far, I've liked every version of writing that I've gotten to do.
That's fantastic. Can you give us a little hint of what that other project that you're doing for older kids?
It will maybe be a novel. It involves the ocean and is maybe slightly darker, I would say, than the last two picture books.
Okay. Was that darker version of the ocean story, is it something as you're creating coral and the octopus and you're having fun and you're drawing all these pictures, does the dark story kind of seep in and ooh, I could do something with coral here, but I won't, but I'm going to do it to coral and this other, we'll call it something different and we'll do this other story?
Yeah, I would say the dark stories always seep in. I love picture books and I love fairy tales, but I also love horror. So I'm a very weird combination of writer. So this book I was actually starting to do before Coral. So it was the dark story first, and then me maybe wanting a reprieve from the dark story and having a more happy ending story.
I can relate I loved horror. I was a huge Stephen King fan. I grew up reading this author, Edward Rose Snow, who wrote ghost stories based here in New England. Anne Rice, I love that. But when I was in the middle of an Anne Rice novel when my son was born, and I was reading it, and my son was born, came into the world, and when I got back from the hospital, and I think I was sitting down next to his crib, he was sleeping, I picked up the novel again, and I went back into that world, and I got, nope, no evil for me. And I hadn't, he's 30 now. I haven't read a book in the horror genre. I did listen to a Stephen King novel as I was driving across the country last fall. And that was okay. It wasn't really crazy. It was just kind of weird as opposed to horror. But it's weird how your taste in entertainment can change depending on what you're doing in your life.
No, that makes complete sense. I tend to like more fable-like horror, so not anything explicit. It's more a dark fairy tale kind of thing. Magical realism I'm also very much into.
Oh, well, I think that Stephen King book was called Fairy Tales. You would like that because that's what it was. It was just this weird kind of fairy tale. And I really enjoyed it. And it was like 25 hours long. So it got me through half of the country. Oh, wow. So anything on the gaming front? You're currently involved in any game creation at the moment?
I feel like it's been mostly books lately, but I hope that I can get on another game soon.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that we talked about, just the fact that games are so much more. I grew up with Pong. Well, I didn't even grow up with Pong. Pong came into existence when I was an adult, and that was 3 images that moved on the screen. Games are so much more than what I imagined, and they're so much more story-driven. Could you talk a little bit about how parents of kids who love those games can kind of get the same benefits we get reading with our kids as they're gaming with their kids?
So I feel like there isn't that much of a gap because, as you said, games have gotten a lot more narrative heavy and just brilliantly narrative heavy. I think things are happening in games that are remarkable and just blow my mind. And the big thing about games is that it's interactive. Like instead of reading or watching a character, you are the character. And when you read with your kids, I feel like it's the same way. Like there is that interactive element. Kids feel like they're a part of the story. So to me, they're very similar things. I've been, I would say, playing more games than even watching film or TV recently because I want that sort of interactive element. It makes me feel like more involved in the story and like I have a hand of changing, particularly when it comes to branching narrative games where like every single thing you do changes what the story becomes. Like that is fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And I feel like given the right context and the right story, like a kid, their imagination could go wild in that kind of setting.
Yeah. It sounds like one of those choose your own path or choose your own adventure novels.
Yes, very much like I used to read the Goosebumps choose your own adventure books. So it's very much that kind of like logic. You have two things you have to decide between. What you decide brings you to another branching thing. And then an ending you inadvertently pick.
Yeah. So many ways that we can spend time with our kids.
Very much so.
Yeah, and that's what we're all about here is just encouraging families to spend time with their kids. Parents, just remember, you are your kid's your first and most important teacher. It doesn't matter if they're teenagers and they're little snots and they're telling you every day that they hate you. They still love you and they still want to spend time with you. And it's just a matter of finding that one thing that you both love, that you both not only you both love, but you both love doing together. And that's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah. And I feel like especially now, like kids code. Kids are coding games at very young ages. If you don't find a game that you can both sort of agree on, build one. Like the both of you build one together collaboratively.
Yeah. Neat.
Yeah.
There's a challenge. Build your own game, put it up on Instagram and tag me and Nick and we'll check it out or something. I'll let Nick check it out and she'll tell me how good it is. Nick, what's next picture book wise from you? Do you have a new project going on? A new kid animal combination that we're going to meet?
I do have a very new idea. No animal in this one, but very much a kid one. It is so new that I don't have much to say yet, but I'm hoping to develop that while I'm developing the older kid one.
Cool. I would love for you to come back on at some point, maybe as I'm just turning 100, so like next year. And, tell me that you have a kid alien from outer space combination and they're going to run amok or do something.
That feels like the natural progression to this.
Exactly. Hey, you know what would be the natural progression for our conversation would be to ask you where we can go to find out more about Out of the Blue and find out more about Nic Yulo.
Yeah, so you can find me at Nic Yulo on Instagram, Twitter, and nicyulo.com is my website. And Out of the Blue will be available in all your stores, your favorite stores, Shop Indie. And yeah, it's coming out in July and I'm very excited.
And let's just give this a plug right now. You have your very first ever live event coming up. And when and where is that? We want to get like 1,000 people down there into that little bookstore just to really blow your mind. You're either going to love it or never do it again.
Yeah, so I will be reading this book at Books Are Magic in Brooklyn in August 5th. With another wonderful author, and I will also be teaching whoever shows up how to draw one of the characters from the book.
Awesome. And maybe in the fall you can come back and teach us how to draw one of the characters?
I would love to.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to our buddy Nic Yulo, all about our brand new picture book, Out of the Blue. Hey, Nick, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Jessica Kim. She'll be here to celebrate Make a Move, Sunny Park. That's the next episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Nic Yulo. Please be sure to check out Out of the Blue. I also want to thank our sponsor, Stacey Woodson, the author of The Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Madison Dieris, Soji Franklin, Ann O'Leary, Monica Rivera Sosa. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.